Hello there, world of tankers, and welcome back to another one of my videos. Today we are going to be comparing the Loza's M4A2 Sherman to the Fury and the other Sherman, along with some Ace Tanker gameplay. So, starting off, you can see that the damage per minute on the Sherman is 2,000, which is pretty much exactly the same as the other two. The penetration is a very low 128, which is the same across the board, and the alpha is an average 160 for a tier 6 medium. The rate of fire, however, is very fast at being 12.5 rounds a minute, where the reload is only 4.8 seconds. The caliber of the gun is only a 76mm, so the shell velocity is not the best. It is quite slow at being only 792. The aiming time on this gun is actually the best at being 1.81 compared to the Sherman's 2.08 and the Fury's 2.08. The dispersion is also better, being 0.29 compared to the 0.362 the other two get. The on-movement turret rotation is the same for the Sherman and Loza, but the Fury has a little bit longer. The depression is 10 degrees on Loza Sherman, however, but the M4 Sherman and the Fury get 12 degrees of gun depression, which is much better. The speed forwards is quicker on the M4 Sherman and the Lozas at being 48 compared to the Fury's 42. The engine power, however, is better on the Fury and the Sherman compared to the Lozas. Because of this, the power-to-weight ratio on the other two tanks are much better than Loza's. Same with the effective horsepower and terrain resistance. The credit coefficient is not yet posted for this tank, but it should be around 150%. And you can see that the average win rate for the Loza is only 46%, which is not very good. The Sherman is 52%, and the Fury is also 52%. The Fury and Sherman are about the same in stats everywhere. The Loza has a better gun, but pretty much everything else is worse. It's pretty much just another tier 6 premium Sherman. When we take a look at the armor profile, you can see it really has no armor. This is an SU-152 aiming at it. I'll pull up a tier 6 medium. I'll get the T-3485 to make it a better comparison. You can see really the most armored spot is 148 all across. Even when using its 10 degrees of gun depression, it's still only 102 thick. Even the gun mantlet is only 140. So really this tank doesn't really have much armor. You can side scrape a little and get some lucky bounces, but really everything that aims at the side of you will HE you. It only has 38, and the rear has a total of 38 also. So it actually does have decent rear armor, but it's just such a weakly armored tank. There's really no point to sit out in the open against tanks you think might be able to bounce you. Enough with this though, let's get stuck into some gameplay. First replay we have is on Winter Malinovka, and we are going to be going against some very, very strong tier 7s, as you can see. We got a Helsing. I was playing some games in this KV2, probably been about 3 games in a row we've played, which was really funny. Because we kept winning, so I felt kind of bad for him. But this tank I really do not like. You know, I don't really like the Sherman format as it is. I don't really like how bad the armor is, and how little penetration the gun has. I feel like the Panzer IV-S is probably one of the best tier 6 mediums you could probably get. The Cromwell B is also very good. It gets 12 degrees gun depression, and it's just got better penetration, more mobility, and I think it actually has a quicker reload. There's just so many better tanks you can buy. Not to mention, this tank costs 7,000 gold to I think 8,000, which is just so expensive. You're pretty much spending $25 on a tier 6, when you can go and buy yourself a low off the tech tree, which you'll play better in, you will earn more credits in. You'll pretty much outperform every other game you play in this thing. Um, Not to mention, really, I played 48 games in this tank and I couldn't get one mastery. Um, I played my Cromwell B a couple times yesterday, probably 5 games, and I got 2 masteries in it. I played the Fury, I got 1 mastery in it. This tank, I just could not pull off a mastery in. I don't know what is off about the tank. The highest game I've played is 2.9 in this tank, and that was out of 50 games. In a Cromwell B, I could have probably pulled off a 3K about 10 out of those 50 games. This tank is just a really big waste of money. If you do buy this tank, really only buy it for being a collector. I just like to buy the tanks because I think they look cool. I like to have all the tanks in my garage that come out. But if you're a player that's wondering if you should buy this tank to do better at the game or to earn decent credits, you really don't buy this. Go buy yourself a T-34, buy a low, um, pretty much buy any other tank in the store for how much this would cost, and you'll be better off. Um, you can see it does have a pretty quick reload. It's 4.8 seconds. I am able to snap some some shells in. But one of the problems also is the shell velocity isn't very good, and that with bad penetration really doesn't help at long distance, since you do lose about 5% of your penetration over 100 meters. And it continues to get worse as the shell goes on further. I've noticed that SU-100Ys are a really big threat. KV-2s can one-shot you when you run this tank. You really need to be careful against everything you run against. This game I did do pretty well. I did 2,600 damage, but I only blocked 100 damage. I have figured out to get the mastery you need a total of 1,000 experience. As you can see, I got 968. But that was 20 shots fired, and all I did was 2,600 damage. You know, this tank just requires so much effort to do well in, and you can buy a Fury, or you can just get the normal Sherman, the Easy 8, for free, and it'll pretty much outperform this tank in most of the ways. And that tank is free as it is. You could permanently enrich that tank for probably cheaper than it costs to buy this tank and still do better. I really would not suggest to buy this. I did earn good credits, 72,000, but again, I did do 2,600 damage, so it does kind of even out. But let's get stuck into that second replay. The second replay we have is on Desert Sands. I'm really not going to get too in-depth into the replay. I'm just going to have it sort of running in the background so I can talk about this tank. Because there's not really much to talk about in the replay. Because I don't find this tank that exciting. I just find it a waste of money for me. I personally spent about $25 on this tank. And I'm really not happy with the product that I received. I like the T-22, it costs me a lot of money, but I do like the tank. You know, it's got special characteristics. This tank is just another premium Sherman. There's already the Fury out. You can run the Fury. The Easy 8, the normal one, you can buy that. That tank's got pretty much better gun depression than this thing, better terrain resistance. All the soft stats are better on that tank, which Wargaming keeps hidden from most people, so that when they buy these tanks, they think, oh, they're so much better than the other counterparts, until you realize they're actually not. Like, this tank has 10 degrees gun depression, which you think is pretty good. If I were running the Fury, I wouldn't even have to drive over here and try and pull off these shots. My gun depression would be well enough to be aiming right over this hill. Like mostly all of the other tier 6 premium mediums have 12 degrees gun depression. The Cromwell B has 12 degrees. The Panzer IV-S doesn't have 12 degrees gun depression, but it has an amazing gun. It has 160 penetration. shell velocity is great. The problem with this tank is there's just nothing special about it. You're spending 7,000 gold on a tank that really should cost, 4,000, maybe even 3,000 gold. Like, really, I would not suggest, you should not spend, this tank isn't worth $10. Um, if this was if this tank was $5, I'd say that's about the max you should spend on this. I would wait until they release it again cheaper. They're probably going to end up buffing this. Although, again, they probably won't end up buffing this tank because the other Shermans are pretty much like this. But as you saw, this tank only has a 46% win rate. The problem with it is that it's really just a worse version of the other Shermans. It's got worse gun depression. Its damage per minute is only 7 quicker, like it's fractions of a second that damage per minute. The armor is worse. Mobility, even though it seems like it's better, since the soft sats are much worse, the terrain resistance is worse. This tank actually accelerates slower. It doesn't reach top speed as easily as the other ones do. This tank has a worse power to weight ratio. Really, there's nothing special about it. And that 128 penetration really isn't going to get you that far. You're going to have to load 8 PCR on a Tiger P. Any tier 7 you really go against in this tank, you're just going to die. You can't really do anything against them. You do have good damage per minute, but if you can't penetrate your shells, there's no point to use it. As you can see, like, an IS isn't a very armored tank, and I'm struggling to penetrate him. I have to end up flanking him to actually be able to penetrate his turret. The best tank you could probably buy as of right now is 7,500 gold. I would get the low. That's probably the easiest. It's got a very accurate gun. This game, you can see I did do 2,900 damage. I still didn't get the mastery, though, which was very annoying, judging that it took me 48 games to get a game close to 3K. And I still couldn't do extremely well. You can see the tank does look nice. If you are a collector, I would say you could pick one up. It's definitely nice if you're a collector, but there's no really reason to run it. I do like the camo, though. The time tested with this looks very nice. But really, though, like, why would you choose this tank over a Victory, The Victory looks nicer. It was cheaper when it came out. It performs better. The Panzer IV-S is a better tank, in my opinion. It's got a better gun. It's got better turret armor. The Fury looks nicer. It's got more gun depression. All of my tanks that I scroll through are pretty much better. This tank has 12 degrees gun depression. It's got a much better gun. It's got more mobility. Really, all the tanks here are better than the Loza. And the problem with this tank is that there's nothing special about it, When I go to the store, when a new tank comes out, I want it to be a special tank. I want there to be some unique characteristic about it that the tanks before it do not have. Like the KV-2 is a unique tank. It has terrible armor, terrible gun depression, everything's bad on it except that gun, which makes it a fun tank to run. The problem with the Loza is it's just a Sherman that's worse. It's got less gun depression. It's just an average medium tank. It's got the average medium gun of 160 damage. It's got average penetration of 128. It's got average shell velocity. It's got average armor. There's really nothing special worth making this tank 7,000 gold. Like, if you click on the store, this tank, if you go to the store, this tank costs a total of 8,000 gold to 7,000. It's just, you shouldn't be willing to spend that much when you could buy the FE4 201 for 8,500, and that tank is a tier higher. That tank's way more fun. It's got a special characteristic. It has 3,000 damage per minute. You know, it's got 8 degrees of gun depression. It's got a nice turret. You could buy the T95E2. That tank's got good gun, great mobility, decent armor. You could buy an IS-6 for the price of that tank. You could buy a Jagdtiger 88 for 7,400 instead of Loza. You could get the T-34, the T-26. There are so many tanks you could spend your money on over the Loza, which it just makes no sense why Wargaming released a tank that expensive. There's really no point to their price judgment here. But really, don't buy this tank. Let Wargaming know that they made a mistake by making this tank so expensive and it not even being worth it. This is just my opinion, though. You guys can still pick it up if you want, but don't expect to be impressed with it in any way, shape, or form. I'll see you guys in the next video.